to yet another live session. It's been a while that we had have any live sessions on LinkedIn or on YouTube, so I'm very excited to have this one with Roger. I knew you, Roger. Like I remember speaking to you last time when we were talking about career goals and just how we want to align our long-term goals with our values and how that really changes our day-to-day routine and like how our passion sort of drives that. So
Yeah.
it was a very insightful conversation, and I have been like impressed is just an understatement with your journey and with your motivation to help people out in their career and like their journey to relive their passion. So I know that you've been a faculty member in various schools and you've been in the teaching profession, you have been in the coaching profession for quite some time. um, I would like in your words that you describe about like what you do, especially about your school of reinvention, because that is something I'm also like very curious to like know more about.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, I just want to say, like, I'm incredibly impressed with how you've engineered such an amazing career. I think back to that first conversation you and I had, and that was, gosh, I think over a year ago, and you were, sharing some things with me about where things were at that point in time, and just watching how you have engineered together what I think it looks like at least a dream career, and watching you get to speak at all these events and all of that, it's just awesome to see how what happens, right, when you start building a life that's aligned with your values, your passion, your
Yeah.
purpose.
Yeah.
You become your best self, and we're seeing that. I mean, you've had such a busy month, and I think you've got way more speaking engagements coming up. I think tomorrow you have one actually that
Yes.
you advertised. Yeah, I love how you have to, like, I think so. Yes, I do. So congrats on that, because I think that's really the you're such a great example of what this book is all about. When we start to pursue things and we start to take those small steps, and at times the larger, riskier steps,
Mhm.
we get closer to that. But a little about me, yeah, to your point, I mean, I've reinvented myself so many times. My journey to reinvention started back in 2005, and it wasn't career reinvention actually that I started with. It was health,
Mhm.
finances, and relationships. Those are the first three areas of my life I reinvented. And it wasn't until around 2008 when I launched my first career reinvention. I've gone from being, even as early as university, I went from being a finance major to going right into the marketing world rather than finance. So I made a pivot right away. I went from national account sales to teaching high school and middle school math, and I had a blast doing that. I became a speaker along the way. I became an executive coach. And then I started, to your point, teaching at universities. I teach entrepreneurship at University of Pennsylvania and at
Mhm.
Sarah Lawrence College. And then from there, became an entrepreneur and an author most recently, which is what I think what brings us here together today. So the journey's been, varied. It's been great, full of ups and downs.
Mhm.
A lot of the times, just looking from the outside, it's like, wow, so many cool things, but plenty of downs in there. But you know what? When you're doing things you love, you can appreciate even the toughest moments, because you know that, hey, look, it's life on my terms.
Yep, I completely agree on that. So when looking at your career, right, like how did you decide to work on a book, or like, what sort of motivated you to go ahead with this book?
Yeah. So back in gosh, we're in 2022. So 2 years ago in 2020, I got laid off from my job, and I was inspired by a mentor at the company who challenged me to do something to help some of the other people who were being laid off.
Mhm.
She knew my history. She knew that I had already reinvented myself many times. So she told me, you know what, I'm not really that worried about you, because I know you'll figure it out. You've done that. You've practiced that skill or that muscle.
Uh-huh.
But there are a lot of people here in this company who've been working here most, if not all, of
Yeah.
their career.
Yeah.
And, for them, this is going to be a pretty big shock. And so she challenged me to find a way to help them. And so in our final 30 days, I started what I called the Reinvention Mastermind. It was probably the first time I actually used the term intentionally,
Uh-huh.
not just some accidental term I threw around, but I
Yeah.
really decided, like, I think this is the right word. And then I started to prepare the content for it. I realized I need to just kind of dig through my own experiences, try to
Yeah.
isolate what did I do, like what really made the difference, and what was just coincidence or luck or whatever, to
Yeah.
bring the things that matter. But then I started looking at others, because I realized, well, this audience is a little different than me. I'm 40. At the time I was 39, and a lot of them were in their 50s. And so I started realizing I need to find somebody else who can I can draw stories from. And it was actually my father. because he had been laid off in his early 50s, and
Uh-huh.
he had also switched careers a few times in his late 40s and 50s as well. And so I started drawing stories. The more I drew these stories, the more I just thought, there's, I think, a book here. And so, and I had honestly been a lifelong dream to, or almost a lifelong dream to write a book.
Yeah.
And I decided, let me give this a shot. And well, I had a few false starts, but it wasn't until fall 2021 when I, found a program, a community, I should say, of authors. And we began writing together. We started building our manuscripts so that we can all submit them to a publisher to see if we would get accepted. And well, the rest is history, because now the book is here. It exists. It's out there. And actually tomorrow it releases on Amazon. So actually it'll ship to everybody tomorrow, or on Kindle it's available, and it's
Yeah.
available all around the world on Amazon. But that work I did to help others, I
Yeah.
started thinking, if I could put this into a book, maybe then I could reach more people.
That's amazing. I'm waiting for my copy, by the way. And I wanted to like say something. So like there was a point in my life, probably like 2020, mid 2020, when I started writing a book of my own. And I probably like went through two chapters, and that was it. And like for me, one of the things I realized is that, one, I thrive in chaos, so I'm more of a person who likes to do different things, and like put those puzzle blocks together to like go to like my eventual goal.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, like what I found was difficult was to manage multiple things and still focus on writing my book, because I think I did not find that focus for myself to do that over a long period of time. So when you're going through like this journey, right, like to write a
Yeah.
book, there is some things that you figure out about yourself, that hey, is this my thing, it's not my thing, what are my strengths, or like what is the real personality that is behind me. So what was that thing for you? Like what did you discover about yourself while you were through this journey of writing your own book?
So I learned a lot about my writing style, like
Uh-huh.
what works for me. For instance, I went in with all the intention of being the person who writes a little bit every day. So that's like a profile of a type of
Yeah.
writer that every day I'm going to write a couple of pages. And you're chipping away at something and all
Mhm.
of that. And I really thought, that's going to be me. I'm going to be up every morning at 6, 1 hour. I'm going to write and at least have a couple of pages. And
Yeah.
that'll help me build something. And if I do that every day for 3, 4 months, I'll have
Yeah.
a lot of pages. So,
Yeah.
like, I'm going to be good. I'll have enough for a book and I'll be able to do this. I was not that person. I
Yeah.
realized that I have a different approach,
Yeah.
and there's no like one that's right or one that's wrong. It really just depends, like, what's your approach, and
Yeah.
embracing that and not trying to fight it too hard. So after a little bit of trying to fight it, I realized I have
Mhm.
another way. My way is having conversations like this with people like you, connecting with others, and allowing that conversation and some notes I took to really process in my mind for like a few days, or
Yeah.
sometimes even a few weeks. And then I'm thinking about this. I'm sharing the insights from a conversation like the one that we had. I
Yeah.
shared after you and I had that conversation a couple of years ago. I remember I was talking to my wife about it and a couple other people, because I thought, wow, there's some really interesting insights in what you're experiencing. And I thought, there's something there, and, something to simmer on.
Yeah.
Well, that's how I approached writing. As I did research, I didn't necessarily want to begin writing after
Yeah.
I did the research. Sometimes I just needed a week to process that. But I spent a lot of active time thinking about the conversations I've had, the people I've interviewed, and the research I did. And
Yeah.
then when I sat down to write, it wasn't about writing a little every day. For me, it turns out I'm more of a marathon writer, like, or I don't know, whatever the right word is, but I want to write for like many hours straight, because
Yeah.
when I get into it, I get into a state of flow that
Yeah.
is hard, like, is would be a shame to break. I could break it, but
Yeah.
gosh, I'm so on fire that I'd
Yeah.
rather just have a solid 3, 4 hours of writing and
Yeah.
then say, whew, there we go. And
Yeah.
then I'll end up with way more than
Yeah.
like 1 or 2 pages. I might end up with 10 to 15 pages of content, which, by
Yeah.
the way, doesn't all make it into the book, but
Yeah.
you start to
Yeah.
have that. So I learned that about myself.
That's amazing. And now let's probably like start talking about your book itself, right? Like what are some of the sneak peeks that you could give to the audience that they can expect in the book, and like how do you think that would be able to like help different sort of like people from like different career journeys, so like people who are probably like early professionals, people who are like in their mid career levels versus people who are like senior in their leadership?
Yeah. So let's start with early in the career, right? Let's just kind of begin there. And I think, for people who are early in their career, one of the things that this book will really do for you, and certain parts of the book I think that will connect with you, are
Mhm.
going to be related to how you begin building a dream career. Because one of the things that I learned in the research for the book, and just, kind of researching my own experience and what really happened along the way, was that there are no real like dream jobs to apply for. Truth
Right.
is, if you really allow yourself to dream, the dream job you have in your mind probably doesn't exist. And that's actually a good thing, because that means what you're dreaming is way more exciting than anything that anyone has ever come up with. You're not just taking what others have decided is a
Yeah.
dream job. You're saying, I have my own vision of what being a speaker is, or I have my own vision of what being a coach might be. And
Yeah.
then what you do is when you know that truth, when you know that you can build it, not like I have to accept it. Like, no, I
Yeah.
can build it. If I don't accept what's out there, that's okay. I can build what I want. When
Yeah.
if you know this early in your career, I
Yeah.
think what you do more intentionally is you begin building a dream career. And it doesn't happen, in a day or a month or a quarter or a year. It takes years. I wanted to at one point, spend time in the classroom as a math teacher.
Yeah.
Well, the I started the first experiment in teaching math, which was simply putting an ad on Craigslist to tutor
Mhm.
people. And when I did that, it was 2007. It wasn't until 2012 that I was in the first classroom teaching high school math. It was a 5-year journey to get to that point,
Yeah.
but it had to start with an experiment and all of that. I was building that dream career. I wasn't just going for
Yeah.
the job that existed. I was
Yeah.
like, oh, I have a vision for the kind of role, the kind of people I want to work with.
Yeah.
And, I just really pursued that actively. And so for people early in their career, know that you can build your dream career. It's a
Yeah.
buildable thing. And as long as you go into it with intention, even when you're not sure what it is you want to do, just test things out, test experiments, try things. Little by little, you start to get more clear about what you want. For
Yeah.
those later in their career, I think it could be, for instance, like, you might be in a place where you're thinking, I've been doing a career for so long,
Mhm.
10 years, 15 years. And you know what? There's something else that I'm interested in. But, I'm stuck in my career. I've got a lifestyle to keep up. I've got an income that supports that lifestyle.
Mhm.
And gosh, could I even take a pay cut? I would say probably the biggest idea from the book that helps people in this situation is this key insight that I learned along the journey, which is that when you actually get a pay cut, we often tend to see it as a loss of something.
Yeah.
But what we forget is that there is actually another side to that equation, kind of like in accounting. When something goes down, something goes up. Or maybe not that. Actually, that's more like a direct proportion or something like that. But what's happening is, or an indirect proportion. But what's happening is that when you lose a little bit of income, so imagine your pie of your life and a slice of that is your income, and you
Mhm.
remove that, you think, I've lost something, there's an empty space in there. What you're going to replace it with is fulfillment. Because if you're doing this in the interest, not if you're just quitting because you're like, I quit, I hate my job, I quit.
Hmm.
That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is I quit because I want to move in that direction, and I
Yeah.
know the direction I want to move in.
Yeah.
And when I do that and I pursue that, even if it's not perfect, when for me that was working with students, I eventually quit my job, lost that income, that slice of the pie disappeared, and now I
Yeah.
started working with students making way less money. But what I
Yeah.
realized was that the fulfillment that I drew from that was a pie slice bigger than the one that I took out. So imagine you're trying to imagine just in your mind, shoving a bigger slice into a small empty spot where one was missing for a little while. What you do is the pie just kind of has to grow to keep up with it.
Yeah.
You actually are more fulfilled. Your life is actually richer in a different way, and you are your best self. You start to actually move towards things that actually bring the best out of you. When you're at your best, I promise you, the income is not far. The
Yeah.
income will take care of itself. You don't have
Yeah.
to go, oh my God, I got to go find money. I got to go find money. To the extent that you got to pay your bills, yes, please do that. I did that. I parked cars. I folded shirts at a mall. All this with like 2 bachelor's degrees and then later 2 master's degrees. I did
Yeah.
whatever I had to do to get those minimum
Yeah.
requirements done. But you know what? Income followed. When I followed what really mattered to me, I was
Yeah.
my best self. And it's amazing what happens when you start doing that.
I completely agree with that. And I think that's something that you need if you want to wake up every day and be excited about what you're trying to do. and have that in a consistent manner every single day. Because what ends up happening is when yourself, like you have a different set of passions and value, and that does not align with your career, then that becomes like very, very difficult for a person to like live through every single day. So that's
Yeah.
I believe like that's where, like I'll probably like give my example, because I feel like I feel like I had found that passion for myself in data science and like in what I'm doing probably a little earlier in my career when I was like just starting off my undergrad. So
Hmm.
what that makes me feel like is like even on the weekends, or like, you know, whenever I'm going on a trip or something, I am excited about learning something with that's related to my field. So like I
Yeah.
just made a video about this recently about sports analytics. So we went to watch US Open finals in New York, and I was watching the match. It was something new for me. Like I have not been following tennis, so it was something new for me.
Hmm.
But what I was more intrigued about is the screen which was showing match analytics, which was showing like explainable insights about, like, you know, what are the sensor data that's being tracked and how they're using that for predicting the likelihood of either of the players winning the match. So sort of, you know, like that's always there in the back of my head, and that sort of like creates that spark in my mind. So
Yeah.
I feel that's sort of like that's when your passion aligns with your career, and like, you know, and I actually wanted to talk to you about the values that you have mentioned in your book. So
Hmm.
when somebody is trying to reinvent their journey, either be it like relationships or career or
Yeah.
anything else in their life, a lot of people I see are even going through like spiritual reinvention, where they're trying to
Yeah.
see how do they realign themselves with these values, right? So,
Hmm.
what are some of the values that you have mentioned about in your book, and why do you think these values are important for reinvention?
Yeah, so I think that, you know, values are something that are clearly very important to us. They're a great guide for how we behave, the types of opportunities we pursue. Because you know what? I might know that I love teaching math,
Yeah,
but not all math teaching opportunities are equal, because I might be in a school where their values are so in conflict with mine, and I may end up teaching math. So yes, I am teaching math, but that doesn't mean I'm going to be fulfilled if I'm doing it in a place that maybe doesn't treat students the way I believe students need to be treated, or
yeah,
doesn't appreciate learning the way the way I see learning being appreciated. And
yeah,
so it's really important for you to know, like, what does matter to me. What are those values I have? Because as you start to look for, an engineer and design your dream career, it's
yeah,
important that you understand, like, because that's your values, because that's going to help you decide what type of organization you might pursue, or what type of people you might partner with, or what
yeah,
type of customers you might go after. One
yeah,
of the hardest things that I had to do along the journey was say no to really potential customers, right? People who wanted to sign me up for something, whether it be
mhm,
coaching, speaking, training, teaching, whatever it might be. And on face value, looked amazing. They would have paid my full rate. They would have paid, so money wise, it looked good. From a business decision perspective, it looked like, okay, that makes sense.
mhm,
However, the downside, the trade off would have been that, you know what, their values and mine are so not aligned. Like this,
mhm,
I'm just going to go in and do the job. Like I'm just going to go in and sure, I'll speak. I'll say whatever you want me to say, and I'll say it in a nice way, and it sounds good and all that, because this is what I do. But my heart's not going to be into that. And then you got to decide, as someone who's designing and building your dream career, is that what you want to do? Like, is that how you want to do it? Like, do you want to take on those kinds of speaking engagements or those kinds of engagements, or do you want to do things, work with people that light you up, people that fire you up, where you're like, oh my gosh, we're all running in the same direction.
yeah,
And so what I found is that's where values play a really massive role. But the other thing about values that's important in the book is that they change, they evolve,
yeah,
and you mentioned spirituality, which I thought was really interesting, because a lot of times it's easy to assume that something like spirituality doesn't change over our lifetime. Like, oh, well, that's locked in. That was installed in
mhm,
me when I was young, and I'll probably keep that for the rest of my life.
yeah,
No, as you're suggesting, you're finding that that's not the case.
yeah,
People are asking questions, they're rethinking, even their own spiritual values, and that's really important. And I think that's kind of the point of the book, which is even our values do shift and evolve, and over time, reinvention is an opportunity to align parts of our lives with our shifting and evolving values passions, and purpose so that we can always stay in alignment. It doesn't mean you'll always be perfectly in alignment, but you'll notice, hey, something doesn't feel right. My company that I worked for, you know what, 5 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
I loved them. They were pursuing the kind of customers I wanted to do, help or work with. They were making the kind of impact I wanted to make. That's not the case anymore. It seems they've moved on, and that's okay. No need to, doesn't matter to judge them or anything. It's just,
Mm-hmm.
it is what it is. If they are no longer doing the kind of work that made you excited,
Yeah.
well, luckily you can become aware of that. And then you could say, I need to start making a change. I need to start planning a change. I don't have to run away now, but
Yeah.
I'm aware that this is not going to be a situation I want to be in for a long time. And it's time to start plotting my exit and devising, like, where do I want to go next? And
Yeah.
so that's the role that values play. I think it's incredibly important to, know what they are at any given time, but also know that it's okay that they might change.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And one of the things, like, what I look forward to in a book, or like, especially a reinvention journey that you're talking about, is more of like a step by step approach, or like, understanding how long does the process take and what are the pieces of the puzzle. So can you probably shed some light there on, like, if somebody wants to reinvent themselves, how long does it take, and like, how do they move forward with it every single day?
Yeah. So the question of how long it takes is always a fun one to answer, because the answer is really, it takes as long as it takes, which is the answer no one wants to hear. But the honest truth is that there is no one predefined amount of time. So sometimes people go into it and say, I must reinvent myself in the next 3 months. Well, that's a great intention to set, because it will do one thing. It will let us know, me as a coach, or and
Yeah.
you as the person pursuing reinvention, that hey,
Mhm.
this is urgent and you want to move quickly. That's
Yeah.
good, because that means you'll take action more quickly. That said, it doesn't guarantee that the things that need to fall into place will fall into place within your 3 month timeline.
Yeah.
Sometimes things take time. And so reinvention is one of those things that it takes the time it takes. When
Mhm.
I decided I wanted to reinvent myself into a math teacher, I had
Yeah.
no clue that
Yeah.
that was going to take 5 years. But it took 5 years. And you know what? I loved every minute of those 5 years. I had a blast because I was living a life aligned with my values, passion, and purpose.
Yeah.
But as far as steps to take to go to that part of the question, because I think it's really important, like, what can we do today? Like, what
Yeah.
can we start doing in this moment so that we can begin building our next reinvention? So I'm going to share like 4 strategies that I think are going to be the ones that you can start practicing right away. And these are strategies that I've practiced for a very long time. And when I look at and study people who have successfully reinvented themselves, I see these 4 strategies in their life. Like, I see them, and they're not always very intentional, like in the sense that they weren't thinking, I'm applying the 4 strategies. My
Yeah.
mission through the book is to make those 4 strategies
Yeah.
something that we all would say, good, there's a formula, let me start doing that. So the
Yeah.
first one
Makes sense.
is to make sure that you're connecting with new people. It's
Uh-huh.
really important that you're listening to new voices and new ideas, and new people will often bring that to you. But a
Yeah.
little way to cheat this is, if you're struggling, if some people are like, oh, but I'm not as outgoing, like I'm not as comfortable meeting new people. That's
Mm-hmm.
okay. Reconnecting with old friends, old dear friends who you haven't been in touch with in 3 to 5 years, they're like new again,
Yeah.
because
Definitely.
time passes, we change, we grow, we evolve.
Yeah.
So even someone you haven't talked to in 3 to 5 years, chances are they're kind of like new again. And what I
Yeah.
mean by talking to them and getting their ideas and their voices is, if you have an idea for something you want to do, just
Mm-hmm.
mention it. Hey, I've been thinking about doing this thing. I want to write a book, and I want
Yeah.
to write a book on this topic and all that. And just start having those conversations. What's going to happen when you do that is people are going to start sharing their reactions, their ideas. Oh, did you consider this? Chances are, the more people you talk to, the more you're going to realize, no, you did not consider all those things.
Yeah.
You now have a pipeline coming in, a pipeline of ideas flowing into you. You don't
Mm-hmm.
have to use them all, but now you have a pipeline of ideas. Reinvention requires ideas, because there
Yeah.
is no one way to solve this,
Yeah.
challenge or address
Yeah.
this challenge.
Yeah.
So the more ideas you have, the better. Step 2, or strategy number 2, is going to be adopting new perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
It's so important that we learn how to see the world from different vantage points,
Mm-hmm.
because when we do that, we see different possibilities. And that's
Right.
really what you're looking for. It's the different perspective simply allows you to see new possibilities that you couldn't see from where you stand. So
Yeah.
when for instance, if you are in a company and you work for a company and you want to make more money, from your vantage point as an employee working for a manager, working for a
Mhm.
company and all of that, you're like, a promotion or a raise are going to be, that's how I get more money.
Yeah.
Well, if you ask an entrepreneur how you get more money, they're like, hey, why don't you create a side hustle, something you could automate, set and forget, and it just starts generating revenue.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden you're like, gosh, if I could do that, if I could spend an extra 10 hours a week building that over the next like year, at the end of a year, I might actually have a stream of income that, let's
Mhm.
say, is equivalent to an extra 30,000 a year.
Yeah.
Well, if I'm making $100,000, well, guess what? I just gave myself a 30% raise, and I didn't have to ask my manager for it.
Yeah.
So this is the way someone else would look at it. And I give this example because this is what somebody did for me. When I
Yeah.
was looking for like, how do I make a little more money? Somebody was like, well, why don't you just speak outside of the company, like
Yeah.
deliver speaking engagements, all that. You'll give yourself a raise, like, and it'll be bigger than whatever the company would give you. Because
Yeah.
most companies will cap a raise at 20%. So if you're
Yeah.
making 100, you're only going to get 20. But if I go out and speak, I might make 30, 40, 50. Well, there you go. I just gave myself a 50% raise, and I did it on my terms, and I engineered a life that's more aligned with the things that I love, rather
Yeah.
than saying, hey, company, which I do enjoy working for, but you know what? Like, can you just give me more work so I can get more money?
Yeah.
What if I don't like that extra work I'm going
Yeah.
to get just so I
Yeah.
can get some more money? So,
Yeah.
perspectives, create new possibilities, talk to different people. They will also share new perspectives.
Yeah.
Three,
Yeah.
new passions.
Mhm.
Exploring new passions is going to be incredibly important, because new passions are where you're going to also see your best self emerge. So when we do things we love, when we do things
Yeah.
that get us excited, whatever it might be. If you like tasting wine, go taste wine. If you love like drinking different kinds of coffee, go drink it. Or roasting a coffee, go roast coffee. Whatever it is, racing cars, playing soccer, whatever
Mhm.
the thing might be, do those things and explore others as well. Because
Yeah.
in the process, your best self starts to shine. And one of the
Yeah.
things I share in the book, and one of my favorite quotes, is that when you follow your passions and practice them, you
Yeah.
become a magnet for resources,
Yeah.
people, and opportunities.
Yeah. Yeah.
Think about the last time you found somebody doing what they love. You're a great example. When you're online and you're doing your thing, we know you love what you're doing. And so it's like, it's hard to resist. Like, well, I want to see what else, she's doing. I want to like follow more of her work, because you become a magnet when you do those things that you love doing. And so following your passions, whatever they might be, and don't
Mhm.
worry, don't put the pressure that they have to earn you revenue or earn you income. Just do them. If you like playing soccer and you're not going to become, the next Lionel Messi or Cristiano Ronaldo, that's okay.
Yeah.
You could
Yeah.
just play for fun if it brings out the best in you.
Yeah.
And then the final strategy, new questions. It is so important that we ask ourselves new questions,
Mhm.
because the problem is that often, so when we think in questions. We ask questions and we think through those responses. The challenge is that often we think the same questions.
Mhm.
Sometimes they are definitely going to set you up for disaster. Like when something goes wrong, you might think, "Oh no, why me?" That's a
Yeah.
question. Why me? And then you start thinking about, why me? What is it about me that puts me in this situation? Answering that question does not give you a solution. It
Yeah.
simply maybe attempts to explain why
Mhm.
you're in this crappy situation. And so it's important that we
Yeah.
shift our questions. What we could ask is, what are 10 ideas that might help me improve this situation or
Yeah.
solve this problem?
Yeah.
Or how might I go about, changing the story or the narrative or whatever it might be? These are questions that, rather than kind of pointing us backwards, point us forwards. So
Forward.
new
Yeah.
questions are so important in reinvention, because you have to reimagine and you have to rethink the way you look at the world to see what you can't see
Yeah.
today, so
For
that you
sure.
can begin your reinvention tomorrow.
For sure. Roger, it was amazing talking to you, and like it was great that you shared so much information about your book. Before I wrap up, I want to have a picture. So if you can just pull up your book on the screen. So I'll quickly take a
Yeah,
screenshot and then we can have something
yeah,
as a memory for later. Awesome.
absolutely.
Awesome. Awesome. This is amazing. And Roger, I am waiting for my book. Once I get that, I would love to read it. I'm going on a little vacation, so this might be a little, carry on thing for me. So yeah,
There you
thank you
go. I
so
love it.
much for spending time with us. And I'm glad that we had like over 500 people who joined us through the live stream. That's the number I saw on LinkedIn. So yeah, this was amazing. Thank you so much.
Oh,
And
And thank you for the opportunity.
yes,
For those on the chat that are listening in, I love the some of the comments and questions, and put them in the comments section of the post, because I can just jump in there and respond to some of these things if you're
yeah,
on LinkedIn or YouTube or wherever you might be. Also, the book is available, so it's available globally on Amazon. So wherever in the world you might be, if you have an Amazon near you that you can access, and of course Kindle is global, so you can access that anywhere. And if you are in any of the major markets that Amazon exists, you can have the book shipped to you as well.
awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much, Roger. Thank you everyone for joining us. And I will put a link of the book in the description below as well, so you can check it out.
Awesome.
Awesome. Thank you
All
so
right.
much, Roger. Have a good
Thanks,
one.
everybody.